Hi, everyone. It's nice to sort of see you all. So in this theater, we have true movie theater lights. So if we're looking down or squinting, that is why. I'm Emily Pogue. I lead marketing for our Talent Solutions business. So that covers our hiring products and learning products.
And I'm Hari. I work on our products for our Talent Solution business.
Just show of hands before we get started. How many people were in the learning session that we did a little bit earlier? Okay, so seems like a good number from what I can sort of see. Well, welcome back. I'm not sure why I asked that when I wouldn't be able to see, but it's really nice to see and meet those of you who we haven't had a chance to meet, and welcome back from the previous session if you were here before. We are going to focus largely similar to the learning session on the same thing, but on the hiring side. So the goal is really to walk you through our hiring product roadmap, our vision, how we're thinking about helping talent acquisition professionals, hiring managers, not just hire for the role that they have at hand, but hire for their organization, for someone who's going to come in and be a fit long term. And so it's really nice to be able to work across both the retention and career development space as well as hiring, so we can really think about how are we helping bring people in who are going to be able to move on to other roles and do more things. And that need right now, I think, is pretty important. I really liked what Glennon Doyle said. It was funny. She was hysterical about the fact that we are leaving a really hard time and going to another really hard time. And that hard time that we're leaving behind is the era of the pandemic, where we saw a lot of things change in the world of work. So things like this stat where seekers are viewing 2 times as many jobs before they actually apply because they're looking at so many more things when they're considering where they want to be. They're thinking about values alignment, and they're thinking about what's going to work for them in terms of where they work, in addition to the skills that they need and the role that they want to take on. And then we're in this era now that, perhaps for some industries, people are facing budget pressures. For others, hiring is as hot as ever. But there's still a race for talent. It's still competitive. And I think we're all trying to figure out, what is going to happen now that we're out of the pandemic? Are some of these trends going to hold? Are people going to stay remote or hybrid, and what does that mean? And so it continues to be this period of uncertainty and things that we need to navigate through. And so a lot of what we're seeing in terms of job seeker behavior really comes down to these 3 things, which I'll talk about. But I think about, even for myself, when the pandemic first hit, after I kind of got settled with what was happening, and am I really going to keep working here with my kids running around? My husband and I spent a lot of time really thinking about, things like, now that we're working from home, is this the place we want to live? Not even just outside the city, but the part of the country or in a different country. We were able to reflect on, what did it mean for us to be commuting? Was that working? Was that helpful? Did we feel purpose from our work? It's a lot harder, I think, to feel purpose sometimes in a remote environment. So you really have to feel like it's something that you want to be a part of. And for me, being part of LinkedIn, I've been at LinkedIn for coming on 11 years. It really confirmed for me that I work at LinkedIn because I feel so aligned with its purpose. And really what is special for me at LinkedIn is the relationships I have and the people that I work with. And even when I wasn't seeing those people every day, the meetings that I was in, such great conversation, people don't take themselves too seriously, and I just felt like this is the place that I really want to be, and I can get my work done remotely. My husband, on the other hand, so he had actually done a career transformation already. He had been in tech, and he went back to school, and he became a college lecturer on oceanography and climate change. And he loves it. It was very aligned with his purpose. And so he was like, yeah, this is what I want to be doing. But what he realized was the commute for him was really having much more of an impact on him than he realized. And it wasn't working as well for our family, and he wanted to be really involved in our kids' sports, and it wasn't allowing him to do that. And so he took the opportunity to say, I'm going to step back. He's looking at how he can translate what he has learned in his degree to teaching high school. He's looking at a small business opportunity that leverages his skills. And so for him, it was a big change. It was an opportunity to revisit. And that's largely what we're seeing job seekers do. So they're considering the why, what's their purpose, how they get it done, what works for them in terms of location, in addition to skills and what the role is about. And what we're seeing some of the most successful companies do is really embrace this and take a completely different approach to their talent strategy. So they're really starting with putting people at the center. So starting with the people that are in the organization or people that we want to bring into the organization, what are their needs, what are their values, what are their preferences, and then building talent strategies around that. And they know that job seekers, when they're looking at their company, they're seeking a sense of connection. And recruiters and hiring managers represent whether or not they're going to have that connection and that alignment with their values. And so when we think about what we can do to help, when we're thinking about this world and how we shift to a more people-centric approach, there's sort of three things that we're investing in where we think we can be helpful in terms of helping talent acquisition professionals, again, hiring managers, think about how they're bringing the right talent into the organization and talent who's going to thrive and go on to be parts of other roles or take on other roles and grow. The first is thinking about how we create more pathways. And I'm going to turn it to Hari in a second. But this is the idea that when we look at how people can source or find talent, there are more criteria that you can consider, people's values and their preferences that can help connect you to the right talent. And then we want to make sure that we're doing that in both an equitable and an efficient way. So I'm going to get back to those, but I'll turn it over to Hari. I think you maybe coined the phrase pathways.
I'll take credit for it. I don't know if that's
So
true.
I'll let Hari talk through that.
Thanks, Emily. It's funny, you were sharing your story about how you and your husband were kind of sitting down and working through it, and we had a similar conversation in our house as well, where we had a 1-year-old, I think, right around the time COVID hit, our youngest, and just having, I'm sure many of you went through it, you had just this kind of realistic conversation about how are you going to make this work? Like, how are we going to actually figure this out? Is this what we want to be doing? How are we going to make this commute through? And I remember the conversation super well. It was super meaningful. But I remember coming to work the next day, and I'm looking at our product, and it occurs to me that none of the things that came up in that conversation, which is for us work-life balance, childcare, none of those things were kind of how the products in the world worked. They generally worked around this idea of schools and titles and colleagues, and how do we people connect on that? How do you navigate the world through that? And it occurred to me that this is kind of this is what we have to do. These are the pathways they have to build because we know how people are navigating the world has changed. They went through that conversation. You had it at home. I had it at home. I'm sure everyone had something at home. And now people are starting to think, how do I actually navigate the world through that? And we started to evolve our product into this concept that there's not a single pathway by which people want to find opportunity. And I know that probably resonates, but it's probably fairly generic. So what I wanted to do is just go one by one and kind of explain what I mean by that. How did the product evolve? How did we start thinking through it? So the very first thing was this concept of commitments. Take my conversation home. It was this idea of how do I find an organization that actually believes in work-life balance. It's important to me. We had 2 young kids. It sounds like for your husband it was around environmentalism. It was around how do I find an organization that lets me go around that? And it was this idea of if we could just figure out organizations who really believe that, how could we connect them through? So we started to do is on the company page, we started to say, look, we'll start with 5, as we'll go. And we'll just let organizations actually come in and say, this is why we believe it. Maybe you have a report. Maybe there's a phrase. Maybe there's a way you can prove it. But there's an organization to come in and prove it. And once we start getting enough of these, it's clear that on the seeker side, we can have people come in and just the way today, you might search by hybrid work. You might search by a particular location, a title. If that's where you want to start, great. And it was this idea that we can create a new pathway then of how people can connect and how this organization can go. So we launched this a few weeks ago now. It's fairly new, but it's a product I'm pretty excited about because I think ultimately this is how this concept of new pathways and new talent can actually get connected. Ryan talked about this a little bit. Another pathway that made me pretty excited is this concept of internal candidates. It's pretty clear that there was a line, I think it was Ryan or Karen or someone who said it, but you may even be in the same job, but that job has changed on you. And as we started realizing that people are going to want to look for skills, it was how do we let people start looking internally as well? And so in the Spotlight section, which I know many of you use and know well, we started this idea of how can you just go in and pick whatever you're searching for and look at an internal view. And for those who are at the Learning section and you talked about how we can come in and set an intent and prove a skill, you can see how we're trying to think about that marketplace. We think there's a lot of hidden talent inside an organization. And again, another pathway that could actually start working through. This one's near and dear in my heart. It was a month after COVID, and many of you know LinkedIn has a ton of data. And we get actually hourly reports, kind of like what segments are up, what segments are down. And we're watching this thing, and it is like the craziest reports you have ever seen. There are some fields that are just booming, and they're like the most heartbreaking things you've seen. And it's not just the data, you're seeing these stories on the feed, you're really feeling it. And we started to say, hey, I think this thing should adjust. Like at some point, people will realize that if you're hiring for customer service, there's a ton of skills in hospitality, or name your pool that you think could fit. And the crazy thing, it didn't. It just didn't happen. And we started saying, what if we rethought this world through skills? What if we started saying, look, rather than saying this is the title, what are these skills we had? So we started letting people not only just when they added experience, we'd suggest the skills, and then we'd say, here, how can you prove it? Maybe you've worked in this place before. Maybe you've done a project. And we started getting all this profile data coming through. And then on the recruiter side, now we're making that super visible. We're making it visible not just what the skill is, but how do they actually know that this is the credibility behind the skill. At least to some degree that you can say, okay, and I understand how people would say they have this. And again, I used to have to pitch this as an inspiration, like kind of this is how the world maybe should be and hopefully could be. It's actually crazy to see the data on this. We're seeing this month, 45% plus actually now of recruiters will come in and actually explicitly start interacting with this skill. It's crazy. In the next few months, we hope that over half of recruiters are now skills first hires, which to me is just a moment I didn't think we would have been at a couple of years ago. The last thing I want to talk about when we talk about pathways is this idea of talent insights. It's a product we've had for a bit, but it's a product that's starting to take new meaning for me as we start thinking through these pathways. Because the reality is, we talked through at least 3 of them, but there's probably so many more dimensions by which people are actually trying to navigate the world. Yeah, there's supply and demand in some of these items, but maybe if we change the policy a little bit on work-life balance, maybe that would attract talent. Maybe there's other things that would come through. And so there's this idea of LTI, sorry, I said an acronym, LinkedIn Talent Insights that we're working through that really helps us kind of bring together the story of pathways that we're really, really excited about. Now, at the core of that strategy, because we're doing a lot, right? If you think about LinkedIn, there's so much data, it's a lot of relevance, a lot of AI. I think deeply, deeply about pathways. But the reality is to be successful and to help actually hit our mission of connecting people to opportunity, we know we have to make sure we always think about this in 2 dimensions. We have to make sure that we're equitable, and we have to make sure that, honestly, you all are efficient. We know that's what's really, really important to long-term kind of success of our world and our talent marketplace. So what I want to do is just back out of the pathways for a minute and spend a couple slides on each, just showing what's coming and how we talk about them and think about them.
I'm going to actually, before you get into the product stuff, talk a little bit about some of the journey that we've been on internally at LinkedIn. As Hari said, it's one thing to create the pathways. It's another thing to make sure that those pathways are accessible to people who historically haven't had the same opportunity because they don't have the same background in education or the same network that many people who are finding jobs and opportunity do. And so several years ago, before we started really thinking about how we could leverage our products, we started thinking about what we could do internally within LinkedIn to change this, to make sure that we, within our teams, within the organization at large, were really bringing in people to the organization that reflected the diversity of the communities that we were in, that we were getting truly the most qualified applicants because we were looking at everyone, not just a slice of the population. And so we really wanted to commit to diverse slates. As an example, we said as we were hiring, we were doing a lot of hiring at the time, we want to make sure that we have diverse slates. And what we saw was, we made some progress, but there was a lot of inconsistency. There were times where a hiring manager would forget or they were really busy and they'd say, I'm just going to default to my kind of traditional way of hiring and go look at people that went to my school or companies that I know. There were hiring managers that just simply didn't have diverse networks since they hadn't built them. And so when they looked at their own network, there were a lot of people that looked like them. Some TA professionals held hiring managers more or less accountable, and some didn't. So, like I said, we made some progress, but we realized that in order to make real progress, we had to do some things differently. And so what we started doing within our organization, within our own TA organization and our own business units, was we said we need to set some clear goals. So we use OKR as objectives and key results, and we said we're going to make sure that every quarter we're hitting 100% diverse slates. And we are going to give TA hold both TA and hiring managers accountable for making sure that that happens every single quarter. And we reviewed the data, we built dashboards, we look at what was happening. We invested in programs to help people diversify their network through conferences and events and reaching people that potentially they hadn't been able to connect with in the past. And that's when we started to see a lot more change, real change, real meaningful progress, and there's still a ways to go. But it was that sort of process that we went through internally. We said, this is something that's really hard. Any sort of change is hard, again, as Glenn and Joyle talked about. And so what could we be doing within our products to make it easier for anyone who is as committed to diversity as we wanted to be, to make sure that they're bringing in people that represent their communities. And so that led to a lot of thinking that Hari's going to share.
Yeah, that's a great. I mean, our journey has been so integral in how we've thought through these products. And there's kind of a theme in this product. This is an area we just have to approach with such humility. I'll give you an example of this on the first one, because it's an area we have to keep committing to get right. But take this product. We launched high candidates. The idea was, there may be bias in the system. So if we're able to hide a candidate's name and photo, you could focus on the skills more than anything else and see if this person has a job. First launched this product, we launched it so that the company would have basically a toggle. And you could say, is this on or is this off? And we learned pretty quickly, we started getting deeper into this, that's a hard change for an organization. It's a hard change to understand, I don't know what that means. There's so many different kind of processes we know and so many different pipelines. So we actually just redid this, and now we're doing it on a project basis. And the idea is each project is different, each talent pipeline is different. We know each organization's processes are different. We know organizations need to test and understand how this works. And so this is the concept that we think this idea of making sure that we have the right bias looks in place makes sense. But we have to make sure, again, with this idea that we keep playing through and we understand which features are working or not. So I'm really excited to relaunch this because I think there's a lot of goodness here. Another one we're launching I'm pretty excited about is the ability to, this is for gender. So we talked a little about skills. And the idea is, of course, when you start looking at skills more, you start building out arguably more complex searches that come through and look for talent across these processes. We started adding these nudges. These are AI nudges that look at different talent pools, and they say simple things. Like if you just added this skill and this skill, because everyone's still learning this language of skills, we think we can actually increase and make sure the population is more representative. And so it's really a tool inline that just makes sure as you're in the flow of this recruiter product, you can start making small changes to make your workflow even better. The final one I'm going to talk about is new, but it is the idea of how do we actually start using recommended matches to help people build diverse slates. And it was built a lot on what you're saying, Emily, and this concept of it's a practice we're using, is a practice we're excited about, but it is a product that's very early. And so we're starting to ramp it out to those, actually we talked about the commitment section, with those with DI commitments, and it'll be a product that we continue to go and test through as we are excited, and we're excited about.
Great. So Hari mentioned efficiency. I know you still have to talk again, so you're not off the hook yet. Mentioned efficiency, and one of the things that we've reflected on a lot is, at the end of the day, all of us, everyone in the talent community, has the opportunity to drive a ton of change in their organization, to make access to opportunity more equitable, to create cultures within their organizations that people want to be a part of, where the trade-off between being at work versus things that they're giving up in their personal lives are worth it, because work is a fulfilling place to be. And even longer term than that, to the point Ryan was talking about, there's opportunity for us to drive major societal change. Again, greater access to opportunity over the long term. And one of the things that I think is really important is that sort of change, again, is hard. And if we create too much friction in the process to drive that change for your teams who are using these tools, it's easy for that to get in the way. They still need to be efficient and productive and get their job done, and you're holding them accountable to that. And so we want to think about ways where we can ensure that they can focus their time on things that they do best, like building relationships, on this longer term vision of really changing society and making work this amazing place to be, and not get bogged down by tools being difficult to use or not in sync or not integrated. And so we're continually thinking about how we can take that friction out of the process for the people who are on your teams who are doing this work. And that's what Hari is going to finish with.
Thanks, Ellie. Sorry, I always laugh when I see the slide because Dan Reed, who runs our recruiter product, when he first presented it, people gasped. And it was he presented to a smaller room, and it was always just made me smile as we go through. Let me explain it, though. It's a fun slide. When we think about efficiency, when we think about productivity, we spend a ton of time thinking about how we can make sure that we get the right messages to the right people. And our open rates, I'm really, really proud of. I mean, 82% of open rate in any kind of media, kind of email system is amazing. And I'm really, really proud of these open rates. But there's a bunch of things coming that I think are going to be really special going forward. The first one, which is that mobile screenshot that you see, it's to my left. You'll see two tabs. One is called the focused inbox. And this is the idea that we know there's more and more things, not even recruiter emails often, just other kind of messages coming through. And we're going to start making sure that there is a little bit of relevance to make sure that the right messages go to the right people. And we've been testing this internally for a while, and it feels different. The product feels different. I'm really, really excited about it. The picture on the right is a series of changes we're making to the recruiter inbox. Some of these you've probably seen. You've seen the ability to set out of office and little tools that we think are really, really special in making sure that people know and honestly protect and make sure your time is used well. The thing we're using on the right here is it's basically insights. Insights to go and make sure that you understand that there's proposals that are come through. When I use the word insights, I don't think I'm actually talking with the right success and the right vocabulary or the roadmap and why I'm so excited about it. The way we're training this model, and I'll go deeper and technically for 1 minute, I'll come back out of it. The AI model we're using to do this, like I know there's a lot of things that sell around AI and a lot of people talk through it. The AI model we're using to train this basically not only says this is what a good message is, it can understand what the person receiving it wants to kind of understand as well and help tailor it. I don't know how much of you are following the generative AI work, but it is a special, special thing when you start playing with it. And it'll take time for that to go, but I think you could start seeing some of those things happening, and it's really cool to start watching through. The ability to automate some of those messages, the ability to automate and schedule some of them, there's a lot of work happening here that I'm truly, truly excited about that I think is going to be something special when it's done. And it's a product that I'm really, honestly, we get to play with these things internally. Just nice job. I really think there's a lot of specialness to come through. I know, though, not everyone lives in Recruiter all day long, just me. But I recognize that there's many more surfaces you walk through. A couple years ago, we started a product where we understood that people often lived in their ATS, and we did Recruiter System Connect, where you can exchange data back and forth. The reason I want to talk about this was two reasons. For those who aren't using it, the data is pretty astounding. 3.5 hours a week on ATS integrations. I mean, that's pretty amazing on how much time is being saved. And two, there's probably some new partners on this list. So I wanted to make sure I spend a minute just talking through it. And then this one is the last one. It's pretty exciting to me. Given some of the value and the excitement we've heard about the Recruiter System Connect, we're launching Apply Connect. So we know the same way people actually live in Recruiter when they're in their ATSs when they're working with Recruiter. When you're posting jobs, we know you often live in the ATSs as well. And when you see candidates and you can see skills next to them, and you can get a better apply flow coming through, it's a product that's really cool. And it's really cool, and I think it'll make the entire ecosystem better as well. And there's 4 new partners here that we're excited to announce work with as well. So all of these in total, honestly, this entire group is working on making sure we give as much time back, because we know how hard this role is. And we know when we do things like this and we save 3.5 hours from just switching back and forth, or we give people those insights just in the right way, I just want you to know we hear you on those things. And a lot of the conversations that you have with me, and hopefully many of you actually already do, but just ping me, because a lot of these things do get in the product, and I hope some of these things are starting to show today. Okay, back to you.
Great. So I think we're actually going to end on this slide, because for those who are in the learning session, there is a slide after this that I was telling you is a QR code, which is an opportunity for you all to take a survey. And I've been told that that QR code is actually not working. So we won't even show it here. I'll let you know how you can take the survey. And before I do, I just wanted to say thank you so much to this audience for joining. I work in marketing. My team puts on this event. We haven't been able to do it for the past few years. And it's just so amazing to be back in person. I'm a marketer who aspires to be an HR professional, so I like to pretend that I am one. I just think it's such an incredible profession where, like I said, the opportunity that I think that we have to change the way that work fits into people's lives, to make it something that's worth the trade-off, to make it a place where you build relationships the same way that you do in your personal life and that you can align it to your values, I think is massive, and I'm really excited to be part of that movement. So thank you to all of you who are making that happen. Thanks for coming and joining us today. Really excited for the Paramount tour tonight. That's gonna be a nice, fun way to engage everyone who is here. So thanks very much. If you would like to come up, if you have questions, feedback, ideas, thoughts on the roadmap, Hari and I are gonna stay around, so welcome anything that you wanna share. And then apparently there will be a notification that is gonna come through the Talent Connect app that is going to ask you for feedback. Please feel free to give feedback on that session, and also feel free to use that as a way to give any feedback that you have on the product or what's coming on our roadmap, ideas that you have, things that you think we should be considering. So thanks again. Have a great rest of your conference.
Thanks all.